You are all certain, are you? First, we must put these Eldar to the sword.
Well, thanks for being here with us. Can you please tell us what's new in Dawn of War 3?
Well, Dawn of War 3 is sort of a combination, a starting point is a combination of elements from Dawn of War 1, like base building and big armies, and Dawn of War 2 with the hero units. So we put those three elements together, and we've added some extra secret sauce to make it sort of a brand new kind of RTS.
So can you elaborate a bit on what's new for the heroes and what's new for the strategy fanatics out there?
Well, you know what? The heroes bring everybody's line units, the basic army is the same. And so what happens with the elites, you can pick up to three per mission or in multiplayer matches. And they add this layer of asymmetric gameplay, right? Because you can choose different elites. You can choose low cost ones that show up early in the game, but they have relatively low power compared to late game elites, which are very powerful. It can be real tide changers. So it's kind of like a toss-up when you're making your loadouts. Which one do I go with? Do I go with, early game elites or a mixture, or all late game elites so I can just devastate if I last that long? So it's up to the player and how they want to play it.
And when you translate that to a campaign, for example, single-player content, how do you choose which elite to introduce when, and how do you pick those? How do you make those decisions?
Well, what we've been doing in the campaign is we've got in every mission there's a hero elite. Our story for the campaign focuses on three heroes, one for each faction. So Gabriel Angelos for the Space Marines, for example. And so he's an elite character, and he's in every mission that the Space Marines play. But then we usually let you choose one or two of the other elites. Sometimes we introduce elites in a mission. So in the mission we're demonstrating here at Gamescom, for example, we give you Solarian, Imperial Knight. That's a late game elite, but we wanted to make a big splash with her. So you get her early in the mission, and she can wreak havoc throughout the mission.
Talking about just the RTS genre as a whole, it's a bit of a pickle, and yet you're planning to release Dawn of War 3. And how does it feel to make such a huge game and such a big name in a genre that's, sorry to say this, but bleeding out?
Well, obviously we don't think it's bleeding out. We're pretty happy with sort of like the audience that we've had in the past. There's been a lot of hunger for doing another Dawn of War title. And you look at stuff like the MOBA genre, and these are all things that have sort of expanded the genre, right? So yes, maybe RTSs comparatively look smaller than they have in the past, but there's still a lot of potential there that we're seeing. So we're really excited about it.
Looking at the MOBA genre, are there elements from that genre that you feel like you incorporated in Dawn of War 3?
Absolutely. When we were starting on Dawn of War 3, we looked at all kinds of reference titles and movies and books, and we started saying, well, what kind of things have we done in the past? How could we modernize them and make them even better? And something like MOBAs, one of the things that we looked at and took away from that was an emphasis on clarity of gameplay. So, for example, when you do something as with a hero in a MOBA, right? It's very clear. There's a big tell. There's a big obvious sign ahead of your actual action, so that the other player can react to it. So there's that sort of strategic use of the abilities and how do you time when and where. But what you're not doing as the opposing player, for example, is you're not guessing. You're hoping that they don't use that ability, and if they start to use it, maybe you have a counter for it, but maybe you don't. So then you gotta figure out how to engage. And we've taken some of the elements like that. The biggest example of that we've had, or a good example of that, is like grenade throws. In previous Dawn of War games, we threw a grenade. It was a very small sort of model flying through the air, and then a big explosion. So the person reacting to it didn't have time. Right? They didn't see it coming. And so we said, well, let's make it more obvious. So there's a big trail on it now, right? Because it's a science fiction universe, we can have grenades that have trails. and so that lets the other player react to it. They're like, okay, cool. Like, for example, if you threw a grenade at me and I'm playing Gabriel Angelos, as one of my elites, I can pull off a retribution. He has an ability which basically reflects attacks. So I could actually bounce, if I timed it right, I could bounce that grenade back at you and ruin your day rather than mine. So.
Another defeat to my enemy.
Talking about the elites and the focus on the gameplay on those characters. I was playing Dawn of War 3 just now, and it felt you actually have this double layer of traditional RTS with the many units and let's call them the peons,
Yeah.
and the hero units.
Yeah.
How do you balance between making the player move any of those characters?
Well, none of those characters by themselves is all powerful, right? So the elites, they feel super powerful compared to the line units, but they're not. What we wanted to do with the elites was make them kind of a very necessary or very useful part of your overall unit mixture. So, for example, Solaria, the Imperial Knight, absolutely devastating ranged attacker, right? Really weak shins, right? If a melee attacker comes and attacks her legs, she can actually go down pretty quickly. So you need some melee attackers or other ranged characters to keep her safe. So we wanted to have sort of a bit of a nice relationship between the line units and the elites, so they enhance each other.
Okay, so while playing, I had I made some stupid decisions. One of my elites died. To some extent, it feels a little bit like it's a little bit game over. Like if your hero dies at a certain point, then it's almost impossible to actually win. Is that on purpose, or is it just me being a noob?
It might be a combination. We want it to be challenging if you lose your elites. They're not gone forever. There's a respawn timer, so they'll come back, which is probably maybe a good sign to okay, if you lost that elite, it's probably time to regroup and back up a bit. Yeah, none of our missions are at the moment are beatable. They can all be beat without the elites.
Okay.
Right, it's just much harder, So the elites bring a necessary, a useful power to your army, to your forces overall, but they're not the critical part. You could have beat it.
Okay, so if you would describe Dawn of War in one sentence, what would it be?
The best Warhammer 40K action strategy game that we've ever made from Relic Entertainment.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
The stronghold has been broken. Never.